It's 2 p.m. on Wednesday, April 23rd here in Korea. Live from Seoul, I'm Conn-young. It's been 1 week now since a nearly 7,000-ton Seoul ferry sank into waters with more than 470 people on board. 150 have been confirmed dead so far, and that figure continues to rise by the hour, it seems, as more bodies are retrieved from the sunken vessel. Now, more than 150 remain unaccounted for. Now, search and rescue operations, now in an 8th day down off Korea's southwestern coast, have been in high gear day and night, but not a single survivor has been found since the day of the accident. Search and rescue efforts, that's where we begin this afternoon at Paengmok-harbor, roughly 20 kilometers from the site of this ship capsized. We have a correspondent at Paengmok-harbor, the nearest port from the accident site. Our Hwang Sung-hee joins us live. Sung-hee, dozens of bodies were retrieved in the search and rescue operations overnight, but still no word of a single survivor.
That's right, Conn-young. We are now onto our 8th day of search and rescue operations, but not a single survivor has been found since the ferry capsized, but the death toll continues to rise by the hour. Now, most of the bodies that have been retrieved today have not been identified yet, but they do come with very specific descriptions, and most of them are suspected to be students. And still, some 150 people remain missing inside the sunken ship, and most of them are students from Danwon High School. The families of the missing camping out here at the Paengmok-hang harbor are clinging onto their last shred of hope, but they are growing restless. I've seen family members who received reports confirming the death of their child pass out, and others are weeping and crying out into the open sea, telling their children to return soon. Temporary mortuaries will be set up at this harbor, and funeral services will start running today. Conn-young?
Right, devastating, heartbreaking indeed. Now, the search operations today, have we seen any progress?
Well, the rescue team did succeed in entering the vessel's cafeteria yesterday afternoon, this coming more than a day after they succeeded in securing a route into the vessel's cafeteria. Now, this is where most of the passengers were believed to have been at the time of the accident, because it was breakfast time when the ship started to list. Now, the rescue team says they will focus their search on the 3rd and 4th floor of the vessel. Now, the 4th floor is where the cabins are, and this is another area that authorities believe that many passengers were at the time of the accident. More than 200 rescue boats, 34 aircraft, and some 550 rescue personnel will be taking part in today's rescue operations. This has been Hwang Sung-hee reporting from Paengmok-hang harbor.
The entire nation is mourning the loss of so many lives, so young and so abruptly taken away. Koreans are holding candlelight vigils, making donations on and offline, coping with this tragic incident together. Meanwhile, in Ansan, the city touched the most by this tragedy, a memorial service is taking place to pay tribute to the young victims from Danwon High School. We have our Connie Kim joining us live from the Ansan Olympic Memorial Hall, where a group memorial altar has been set up. Connie.
Hi, Conn-young. I'm connecting to you live from Ansan Olympic Memorial Hall, which is about 5 minutes away from Danwon High School. Now, the altar behind me opened up to the public this morning, with streams of friends and families paying their last visits and paying their last respects. Now, a total of 47 portraits of Danwon High School students and teachers are displayed here. The total includes the 25 students whose bodies were released to their families this morning. The task force team from the Gyeonggi-do Province Education Office decided to set up this temporary altar, as it's difficult to arrange a group funeral for the deceased. With more bodies being retrieved from waters off Chindo Island, more are expected to arrive here in the days to come. To help the city in mourning, citizens of Ansan and volunteers from all over the country have come together.
To help support our community in this time of need, we have made all of our medicine and resources available to Danwon High School, and will continue to do so until the altar is removed.
We think people from all over the world will come here today. About 100 volunteers are here to support the families of the victims. We are going to distribute food, drinks, and assist mourners.
As the families of the victims wish to hold the memorial altar for all of those who have passed, it will be set up at the Hwarang Recreation Park next week. Conn-young?
Our hearts go out to all the victims and their families. Now, for the survivors, we hear some of the students have been discharged from the hospital and others will be going home soon.
Right, Conn-young. They were 80% of the students that have been receiving medical treatment at Korea University Ansan Hospital were scheduled to be discharged depending on their mental and physical conditions. The director of the hospital said yesterday that keeping the hospitals for too long in the hospital may actually make it a stress factor and hinder the recovery processes. However, the hospital held a press briefing earlier and did not confirm whether those who were expected to be released were in fact allowed to go home. Now, when they do, they will of course receive regular counseling sessions and, if needed, medication as well. Danwon High School, which has been closed temporarily since last week's accident, will reopen Thursday for students that were not on board the Seoul ferry. This has been Connie Kim reporting live from Ansan Olympic Memorial Hall.
A total of 14 teachers from Danwon High School were on the ill-fated trip to the resort island of Jeju when the Seoul ferry sank. On that Wednesday, when the ferry capsized, 3 teachers were rescued while 11 remained unaccounted for. One of those teachers who did not make it was more concerned about her students than herself until the very end. Our Connie Lee has a story of Chun Soo-young.
In the last desperate moments before the ship was going down, a daughter texts her mother, "Mom, the ship is sinking." In shock and in confusion, the mother calls her daughter, Chun Soo-young, right away.
얼른 구명조끼 입어 이렇게 했거든요. 그랬더니 엄마, 학생들은 입었어 이렇게 얘기를 하는 거예요. 그 말은 제가 지금 생각해 보면 학생들은 입혔는데 저는 못 입었다는 얘기죠.
To her boyfriend, Soo-young texts him that there are no life vests. "I'm sorry." The boyfriend calls her immediately, but they hang up after 12 seconds on the line. Soo-young tells him that she needs to call her students' parents.
배가 기울고 있는데 애들 빨리 입히고 챙겨야 된다고 그러더니 자기 배터리 없다고 지금 학부모 연락하고 애들 챙겨야 된다고 그러더니 끊는 거예요.
Her last words to her boyfriend, "I love you and thank you." It was Soo-young's second year as a homeroom teacher at Danwon High School. And as for the school's yearly field trip, this one to Jeju Island on the Seoul ferry was her first. Her room remains untouched since the day she left for the ill-fated trip. Her bike, too, remains parked, waiting for Soo-young to return. Apparently, her grandmother is also waiting for her granddaughter to come home safely.
지금도 그 할머니는 우리 저 딸이 살아있는 줄 아세요. 뱃속에 들어있어서 안전하다고 그러시거든요. 계속 그렇게 믿고 계세요.
But as much as there is sadness over the loss, her mother is also proud of her daughter, who put the lives of her students before her own. Connie Lee, ARIRANG News.
Now, 1 week has passed since the ferry sinking and no additional survivors have turned up, only bodies. The public is nonetheless showing its support, keeping hope alive, and a yellow ribbon movement in the online community is symbolizing that hope and sending out a message, we're still here waiting. Polly has more.
This simple image of a yellow ribbon bow has become a symbol of hope in the wake of one of Korea's deadliest maritime disasters. Its message of one small movement that can lead to big miracles has resonated with people across the nation. The Yellow Ribbon Campaign of Hope was first started by a university student club, urging people to unite in their support for those affected by the tragic accident.
It began as a logo being distributed as a KakaoTalk wallpaper, but it spread to other aspects of everyday life that we can see, like tying a yellow ribbon or string on your backpack. Keeping them in your thoughts is also good.
The Yellow Ribbon Campaign has spread online across social networking services such as KakaoTalk, Twitter, and Facebook, with international celebrities and professional athletes also joining in to express their support for the victims. Meanwhile, the story of Park Ji-young, a 22-year-old crew member, has deeply moved the country. According to survivors, Paek had refused to take a life jacket and instead kept trying to save passengers till the very end. Her body was one of the first to be recovered from the wrecked ship. An online petition has now attracted tens of thousands of signatures, calling for the government to designate her as a martyr. Once legally recognized for her sacrifice, Paek's family will receive financial compensation and benefits, while her body may be buried in the National Cemetery.
Certificates issued by hospital-level medical institutions or police records to prove our actions are most important. In addition, identification documents from fire departments and other authorities are also required.
The Health Ministry says once it receives a formal application for Paek, officials will promptly examine her case for review. Paul Yi, ARIRANG News.
As the death toll continues to rise, anger and frustration is growing among the families of the victims and the missing, who want to know who is to blame for this man-made disaster. With that, the investigation into those who have been charged in connection with the accident is intensifying. For more on this, we connect live to our Kwon So-ah at the news center. So the operator of the Seoul ferry is being looked into very carefully and is under suspicion of a number of illegal activities and actions.
Yes, Conn-young, that's right. We learned a few hours ago that prosecutors raided at least 10 locations related to Yoo Byung-on, the former chairman of the operator's parent firm. They include his home and a church he founded. Financial watchdogs have been looking into possible illegal foreign exchange trading and tax evasion. The National Tax Service launched a special probe Tuesday into 4 firms that are closely related to the ferry's operator Cheonghye-jin Marine Company, and imposed travel bans on 30 related personnel. The Yoo family was banned from traveling out of the country this past Sunday. The family reportedly has around $240 million worth of assets, and Yoo is said to have established 13 overseas corporate branches and used them to snowball the family's assets. Investigations are ongoing and will also be conducted to determine whether the operator was involved in lobbying high-ranking officials in an attempt to skirt regular safety inspections.
All right, so and one man with some of the biggest questions to answer, the captain of Sewol-ho and the crew members may be charged with homicide by omission. Now, tell us what that means.
Yes, Conn-young, as you probably remember, akin to murder was how President Park Geun-hye described the actions of the captain Lee Jun-seok and the crew members. And now investigators are examining whether they could be charged with homicide by omission, which can be pressed in the case of death caused by inaction by the defendant. The joint investigation of prosecutors and police, as well as the Justice Ministry, said on Tuesday they will inspect the legal principles. Captain Lee is currently charged with 5 offenses. They include negligence and violating ship crew law, which requires the crew to remain on the vessel until all passengers escape. Now, to be charged with murder by omission, it will have to be determined that Lee and/or the crew members were willfully negligent, meaning that although they didn't intend to kill the passengers, they didn't care whether they lived or died. This was Kwon So-ah reporting live from the ARIRANG News Center.
Now, another piece has been added to the puzzle of what may have caused the Sewol-ho to capsize abruptly 1 week ago today. Local media reporting that there may have been a problem with the steering gear of the Sewol-ho ferry at the time of the accident. Our Park Ji-won has the details.
This is a repair request form submitted by the crew of the Seoul ferry to ferry operator Cheonghaejin Marine Company about 2 weeks before the tragic accident. It says the steering gear of the now sunken ferry was sending no voltage warnings. Crew members said they had to reset the power and rely on an onboard power supply while they were waiting for power to be restored. The request form added the fundamental cause of the issue was unknown. However, the ferry operator took no action on the issue. Korean broadcaster YTN reported Wednesday that a ship repair company that had worked on the Seoul ferry before said it had not repaired the steering gear of the Seoul ferry any time recently, nor had it received any repair requests about the steering gear. Experts say the steering gear is key to safe sailing for a ship, that any problem in the steering gear increases the likelihood of an accident, and that ships with steering system problems should be prevented from setting sail. However, Cheonghaejin Marine Company appears to have continued to allow the ill-fated Seoul ferry to operate for more than 2 weeks, leading up to the accident last week. Park Ji-won, ARIRANG News.
Meanwhile, experts in Japan have run a simulation to try and determine what caused the Seoul to capsize. Well, all signs point to the ferry's cargo, which they believe was not loaded properly. Our Son Jung-in has more.
This is closed-circuit television footage of the Seoul ferry on the day of her departure from Incheon Harbor. Vehicles are loaded onto the vessel one after another, 30 more automobiles than was previously declared. The last vehicle is loaded and just 3 minutes later, the ferry sets sail. Experts say that's not enough time for the crew to correctly secure the freight.
We assume the crew tied only 2 ropes instead of 4. They may have just tied things up loosely before the departure.
Japanese researchers carried out a simulation to find out what happens when freight in a vessel is not fastened up properly. They made a model 1/50th the real size of the Seoul and raised the center of mass in consideration of the fact that the Seoul ferry had been renovated recently. First, they ran the simulation without any cargo. Sailing at 5 kilometers per hour, the same speed as the Seoul, when turned right, the model sharply leaned outward toward the turn due to centrifugal force, but did not capsize. Next, they added some weight to the ship to account for the mass of the freight and fastened it tightly. When given an abrupt turn, the model again tilts sharply to one side, but is able to balance back without falling. Then they tried again, this time with the same amount of weight, but without fixing it properly. At first, it seemed to be navigating smoothly, but as soon as it makes a sharp turn, it listed to one side and capsized in a matter of seconds.
When a vessel makes a sharp turn without its freight properly fastened, a heavier centrifugal force is applied, causing the vessel to list more outward. In extreme cases, the ship can capsize.
It is common for the captain or the chief mate to take at least an hour to make sure all cargo is secure tight before setting sail. Japanese experts say there was no time to do that in the Seoul's case last week, which leads them to believe that improper fastening of the freight may have been the main cause of the accident. Son Jung-in, ARIRANG News.
Well, the ferry sinking has been making headlines around the world as the international media attempts to make sense of this tragedy. A number of journalists and publications say Korea's so-called 빨리빨리 culture, or pushing things to be done quickly, was in evidence during the handling of the crisis. Now, they also point to bureaucracy of government agencies as another key factor in the slow response to the disaster. Our Song Ji-sun takes a look.
Bloomberg columnist William Pesek thinks the ferry disaster shows the chronic flaws that have existed in Korea for decades. He says the country's rapid economic growth has come at the cost of a prompt response and quick management system at a time of crisis. Questioning why it took nearly 1 hour for rescue teams to get to the accident site, Pesek reasoned that Korea's problems trace in part from the collision between its quick or 빨리빨리 culture and a government that remains obsessed with bureaucracy, hierarchy, and turf, pointing to Korea's culture of basing high-level appointments on seniority. He also pointed out that Korea's business culture needs a thorough re-examination, as ferry operators put lives at risk to boost profits in a hyper-competitive environment. The Financial Times focused on probes being launched into the operator's finances and tax position, while politicians came under fire for insensitive behavior. The British Daily also described thoughtless actions shown by some high-ranking officials, like the education minister eating noodles on a sofa, where hundreds of victims' families were sleeping on the floor at a gymnasium, and a potential Seoul mayor candidate's son depicting the public as uncivilized on his Facebook page. The paper said the family think that if the government had handled the crisis better in the early stages, the damage would not have been as bad. It adds that the parents' only wish right now is to find the sons and daughters' bodies before they're too badly decomposed. 송지선, 아리랑 뉴스.
Let's now turn to other general news making headlines. With U.S. President Barack Obama having embarked on this Asia tour this Wednesday, there has been fresh speculation North Korea may attempt to make a statement while he's in the region in the form of a fourth nuclear test. Experts are doubtful, but Washington says it's prepared either way. Shin Se-min reports.
The U.S. says it is keeping close watch on movements in the North amid speculation that it may carry out a fourth nuclear test while U.S. President Barack Obama is visiting the region over the next week. Speaking to reporters on Air Force One, White House spokesman Jake Carney said the U.S. is monitoring movements at the North Punggye-ri nuclear test site. South Korea's defense ministry had earlier reported detecting increased activity there. The U.S. State Department echoed Carney's sentiment and urged North Korea to exercise restraint.
We continue to urge North Korea to refrain from actions that threaten regional peace and security and to comply with its international obligations and commitments.
The U.S.-based North Korea analysis site 38 North does not believe the regime will carry out a fourth nuclear test while President Obama is in the region. It said the recent activities detected in satellite imagery of the Punggye-ri nuclear test site are dissimilar to those seen in the weeks before previous detonations and do not suggest a test is imminent. Shin Se-min, ARIRANG News.
It's been over a week or 1 week since the sailboat capsized, and the search and rescue operation, however, down in Jindo Island continues. Let's get a check with our Michelle Park for an update on the weather off Korea's southwestern coast. Michelle, how are the conditions today?
Well, the weather in Jindo has brightened up and the area has clear skies currently due to the high pressure front with a visibility of up to 11 kilometers, which is fairly good. Now, also today is the second day of the neap tide periods, during which we can expect the sea currents to dip to their lowest level, which is around to 1 meters. Now, these conditions will last until Thursday, and until then, the search of the vessel is likely to continue for 24 hours. Now, also along with the neap tides, there are two periods today when the tides will be slow, and one is expected very soon in a little over an hour. During this period, the tides will drop to below half a meter for an hour, giving the rescuers an easier time of the search operation to proceed. Well, the current temperature of the water in Jindo is at 11.6 degrees with winds blowing at 6 meters per second, and the height of the wave is at 0.7 meters, which are generally calmer than yesterday. Well, that's all I have at this moment. Back to you, Conn-young.
Thank you, Michelle, for that. And that's all from me at this hour. Our steady coverage on the nation's search and rescue efforts in Korea's ferry disaster continues right here on ARIRANG News. Join me again at the top of the hour.